So great to see you. For those of you who don't know, Dante was actually just screening one of his films, AIDS Diva, The Legend of Connie Norman over in New York. How did that go?
Oh, it was, I used to live in New York, so it's always kind of bittersweet for me to come back to New York. I was there from the late 70s when I moved there with my mom from Peru, and I lived all the 80s, so the beginning of the AIDS era, and AIDS Diva deals with the AIDS activism here in LA. But it's always startling to me to have those memories come back to you, like almost like ghosts when I'm in New York anyway. And I remember the place I used to go with my mom, especially, but I also remember my neighborhood. And I went to Colombia, and my don't hold that please against me. And back in the day, and most of my friends from that were out and as gay men back then are gone. So it's really like a city haunted by me, by all these people that are no longer there. So in terms of the screening was at Lincoln Center, which they have a beautiful state-of-the-art cinema, and I was just like, it was a thrill. It's always a thrill to come back to New York and see my old friends, the few that are still there, and always get because New York is always, there's so many options of things to see, to watch, to experience. So I'm always surprised at how many people showed up to the screening after not being there for so long. I mean, I realized I haven't had an apartment in New York for almost 30 years. So yeah, so it was great. I mean, New York is a fabulous city. I wouldn't live there again. I like living in LA, especially in my old age. It's a little calmer, but New York is always a trip. It's an experience. And I
Yeah.
encourage everybody to have that once in a while.
I also encourage everybody else to watch your movie, AIDS Diva, The Legend of Connie Norman, if you haven't already. And it's out there. There will be other screenings here and there. But as for this one, Raising Zoey, we actually just celebrated Mother's Day. And while we like to think that this film is particularly about Zoe, it's more so about her village, her support system, and especially her mother, Ophelia. So,
Yes.
I'm curious about, I mean, we get to see her really blossom, her mom. She corrects herself when, she says, oh, her old or her real name. And then Zoe and her mom are like, oh, yes, her birth name. So you could see the process, the wheels turning. She's accompanying Zoe at the rallies. She's speaking at these junkets with her daughter. And she's at, the organization to help kind of encourage parents to help process their own child's gender transitions. So we really get to see how when a young child or young anybody that's transgender transitions, so too does their family, right? So I'm curious how you came about her family. How did you meet them? How did you hear about them? And how did your early expectations of how this film would go shift after you acquired all the footage?
Well, I mean, I was fortunate enough to meet Zoe and Ophelia for the first time at the premiere of my previous film, which was about Transvisible, about Bambi Salcedo. Actually, Bambi brought them to the Red Cat, which we had a screening during Outfest in 2013. And I think Zoe must have been around maybe 11 or 12. And of course, they came to the screening, and after the screening, Bambi introduced me to them. But it's after you can imagine after the screening, everybody wants a piece of you, and everybody wants to take pictures of you with Bambi and me and Roland and John, my producer. And so I just saw them. She's cute. I didn't know anything about the background. And then when I really saw them, their dynamic and the love they have for for the community, because they were willing to tell the story so openly was at that year's Transgender Day of Remembrance here in West Hollywood. They were the keynote speakers, and I think they spoke about 9 minutes. And I have a little snippet of that speech at the beginning of the film, because it just struck me, Josslyn. I mean, I remember standing in the back, seeing them interact, seeing them tell their story, and everybody was like, you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was like completely silent, because I don't think we had a speaker that young with with her mom by her side, and who was also Latina. We haven't had that before. So immediately, I remember, I don't know if I told John or somebody was next to me, oh my God, I would love to make a film about them. Because what I saw from Ophelia is that instant recognition that she had to support and protect her daughter no matter what. Mm-hmm. And going back to what I was saying about my mother, that's what she did for me. And there was an instant connection in my head. Like, if Ophelia is anything like my mother, I can see why Zoe is so confident and able to tell her story openly in community. So, but it took a few months before I got the courage. And the reason why it took me a long time, I had been on the journey of telling Bambi's film, and I know, Bambi being an adult, but I could see that there was a difference when you bring somebody who doesn't have the infrastructure or the maturity to handle public opinion, to be on a public in the public eye. And this is like, I'm talking 2013, so it was not like nowadays. It's really overwhelming. It's almost dangerous to put yourself out there so publicly. But even back then, I was sensitive enough to think, should I trust this young girl and this family into this limelight, to the spotlight? But they have been doing a few things already with PSAs for the transgender law centers, for instance. So I remember in March of the following year, I approached them. We went out to dinner, and I said to them, I would love to make a film about you. And I want to capture from one year, I think it was upcoming Zoe's birthday, the 13th birthday to the 14th birthday. So I would not be bothering them for the whole time, for year after year after year. And I remember Ophelia, she didn't say that to me, but later on when we had Q&A, she would say, oh, when Dante proposed that to me, I thought it was not going to happen, because they had a few offers before about people wanting to do their story, and nothing came to fruition. So when we showed up with John to film her when they were living in Downey, it was like, oh my God, this is really happening, so I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, okay. I mean, you say it all. I mean, that Zoe, I mean, she even admits it herself that she gets all of her confidence from her mom, and that she's one of her role models. And I think just in that we can she even alludes to how protective her family is. You could see that in her sister Letty, um, and the meetings that they had with the school. They're very protective. So when you approach them with this idea, and Ophelia is, of course, hesitant, as any mother would be. I mean, were there any boundaries that the family enforced throughout the production? How long did it take to shoot everything? And what were some of those conversations that you had, those early ones, about those boundaries and apprehension?
Yeah, there were some boundaries, some limitations. Like I said, I told them, and I wanted to keep to my word, that I would only be filming for a year. So I would go from one birthday to the next birthday. And I didn't know what was going to happen that year. Luckily, it was a very actually full year. I mean, everything that I captured in the film happened in that year, in that lapse of maybe 12, 13 months, maybe 14 months. I cheated a little bit. In terms of the limitations, I've, well, first, I'm just gonna say something. So I think because I was introduced to them by Bambi, and Zoe had been getting her treatment from the Children's Hospital, and that was a connection with Bambi, because Bambi used to work at Children's Hospital in the youth division.
Mm.
I think there was kind of a trust, you know, and Ophelia always said that she trusted me from the moment that I met her, you know. And the other thing that we found out was that Zoe's birthday is the same as mine. It's on July 23rd. So we're both Leos. And I know that Zoe, you know, she liked that spotlight, you know, she liked the attention. And, you know, I was her personal little filmmaker following all over. And so, and then they had already agreed to do actually a documentary that was produced by Laverne Cox in New York. And that's where that footage from New York comes from, because I went with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there when that happened. She was featured with a few other young trans and non-binary folks at the time. So, but she liked the fact that this film was going to be focused on her family and her. The limitation was, so we show that he has a sister, an older sister, and an older brother. The older brother, I was told that he would not be participating because he has a mental diagnosis, and he couldn't be part of it. And I hardly ever saw him when we filmed in the house. And I guess he was in and out of institutions at the time. He was still a teenager, and that was it. That was the only anything else that I wanted to, pictures and drawings and all of that. Like finding those drawings, for instance, one day we were like in Downey, and I saw those drawings, and I asked who made those drawings, and then it was like a Pandora's box. They started showing me all the drawings that Zoe used to draw when she was happy or depressed, and they were very revealing to me, and I knew somehow they were going to wind up in the film. I didn't know how, but I knew that they were a very important part of her her growing up, you know, her coping, and that she was talented. They were not just, you know, little scribbles. It was like actual drawings, you know. So yeah, I wanted to explore different parts of her skills and her talents, of, you know, not just you know, just speaking, but also as an artist. And we can talk about that, her acting and all of that later, of course.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm so glad that you mentioned that too, because that kind of weaves into the other questions that I had. Because I was curious about how, you know, I mean, the animation, the drawings really make this movie stand out, and it's what makes it so distinct, and it really captures really that imagination and creativity that you have as a child, that, you know, especially in the US, where we're like a burnt out society, and we're all workaholics, and all of that, we tend to lose that creativity. So by it feels, you know, with her drawings, they're great scene transitions, and we get to see her develop with them. But more than that, it is, really kind of like a time capsule of that time of her life. So I mean, this is a 45-minute film, so it's not very long. So I'm sure that there was room, you know, to expand it. And I'm sure you had a lot of really great footage too that unfortunately didn't make it into the film or past the edit room. I mean, what were some of those moments that you wanted, that you were kind of torn about removing in the final cut, that could, I don't know, possibly sway somebody who doesn't understand their transgender child, or even on a bigger scale, maybe not even understand transgender issues on a federal legislative level? What were some of those scenes that could, that you removed that could have possibly changed the impact of this film?
Well, to be honest, Josslyn, like I shot this film a long time ago. Like 2016 came out, so I shot it in 2014 and 15. And I don't remember that there was, because I had to hold to my promise that I was going to shoot only a year
Mm,
with them. I was only going to be bothering them for a year.
mm,
And I think actually, I tried, John and I, my producer, who actually, I have to give me credit. He's the one who animated the drawings. Um, I There wasn't really anything else that I thought there were actually too many things going on in the film, too many areas that I wanted to that were happening. I mean, it wasn't only the family, who was going through changes and through education, and she having her HRT, getting her prescription, but also, included the part that she was, a grand marshal at Pride, one of the youngest one
mm,
on WeHo Pride, and also the part with that girl in Indiana, decided to end her life because of the bullying, and how Zoe and Ophelia were always there to participate, to represent, to speak their mind. And and I really I can't imagine out of the top of my head right now. I can't think of something that I will left out. You know, I was also a little kind of limited in terms of limitations to talk about the dad, because the dad was, he had passed away.
mhm,
And but so, like she says in the film, I wouldn't be Zoe now, he was still alive, because he was uh, you know a very, apparently, were all the accounts that he was very macho, maybe homophobic, and for him to have a trans child would have not been, cool with him, you
mm,
know. So all the things that Ophelia was able to offer, like therapy and support and transitioning socially at school and all the stuff, fighting the school districts and getting help from the ACLU, that would have never been supported by the dad, as far as I know. That's through all the accounts. I
mm,
mean, I guess you could say that I did interview almost everybody in the family, like uncles and aunts, but they were really not adding much, just supporting the big story.
mm,
And I thought that Ophelia and Letty and Zoe were charismatic enough to carry the film, because they were like basically the triad of that family, um, and um, and yeah, and I think the sisterhood between Letty and maybe was a little, and Zoe was a little shortchanged, but I
mm,
think it was really powerful that she had a sister as supportive and as intuitive
mm.
as Letty is and was, and I love Letty, and you know, I knew we had a film with the three of them were together. Different personalities. They all have very different personalities, but they were, at least Letty and Ophelia, the mom, were in agreement that they had to protect Zoe from all the outside forces.
And it's all the more difficult too, considering she wanted to grow up so fast. And when you grow up, you are exposed to those elements and people, you walk out in the world and people will have a say so about you. And Zoe's an adult now and she has grown up. And we're exposed to this world where there are people that are determined to kind of, not kind of, but there are people that are determined and vehemently so, trying to extinguish the trans community. because, out of sight, out of mind. We see that employed kind of in her school as well, right? They're like, oh, well, we've seen people like her before, and it was just best if they moved to another school. Like it's the school's responsibility to deal with the students that they already have. You're not having a great reputation as a school if you're trying to get rid of your students. And well, we especially see that in what's happening in Gaza and Palestine as well, when there are a group of people out there that think that you do not belong there, that they are entitled, and they want to extinguish, they want to change history, rewrite it, erase everything like that. So, and then we see this little 14-year-old girl, and she's an advocate. And maybe she doesn't know everything out there in the world, although she thinks she does at 14. You know, she's she's head on with and determined in her own way because of, she had been deprived for so long from being herself, and now she's ready and confidently ready to be herself. So I mean, all of these events really take place, as you say, about 10 years ago, and and the film still holds up. It's, universal. It hasn't changed, or we haven't changed much, as, although that there are more legislative actions against our community, and it's on the forefront. But she's still this trailblazer. And I did a documentary last year with ABC News, and we sat with actress Nicole Maines, who is in the show Supergirl, and we had her watch her first interview with ABC News. Rewatch herself when she was Zoey's age, and stories like Zoey's and Nicole's and Jazz Jennings were sensationalized in the news. So I'm wondering, it's a long-winded context and question, but I'm wondering, do you ever see yourself revisiting story in her life 10 years later and extending this to be a larger feature film?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, it would be wonderful. I mean, I always, especially with the subjects that I had, like, for instance, from Bambi from 2013, and this is 2016. We're still alive, we're still thriving, we're still accomplishing so many things. It's always great to look back and I'm proud that I was there when those things happen, because they're never gonna be a first anymore. Like for instance, when she gets her prescription and she goes to the pharmacy to get her HRT, and she's so happy. That's never going to happen again. That was it. That was one moment we were there. And so yeah, I mean, there's always the hope, the dream that you can revisit, as long as we're all alive and we're willing to do it. Um, and there is something to say about, like you were saying, there's something to say about growing up trans, gay, non-binary, gender conforming, that when you have a support at home, oh, it could be anybody. It could be mom, dad, aunt, sister, abuela, whoever it is, that you get unconditional love. It makes your journey easier. Not completely easy, because it's always we're dealing with a society that's basically going backwards. But it makes it a little more like you're going as part of a family. And also that element of having Ophelia look for community, and having older trans women, comfort her and teach her and guide her, and usher her daughter into this sisterhood, into this brotherhood of the LA trans community. That was a very important part for her too, of the whole story. I mean, we're seeing right now, just as today, I mean, I just read and it really rankles me, Sundowney, where they used to live, where most of the film takes place, the city council decided that they're not going to allow any pride flags for next month in June, even though The mayor is actually a friend of mine who's he's gay and he's married to his husband. The city council, the majority have decided that Downey is not going to have any pride flags. And you know, the funny thing is, Zoe got an award from them back in the day, like I think it was 2017 or 18. You know, because she was from there, and she was a proud example of the diversity and inclusion of the city. Now it's going backwards, you
Mm.
know. So, and this is happening more and more. So, how do we fight back? At least for me, to fight back is to keep telling these stories, which are timely and timeless and universal, and teach people that you know, we all have the same intrinsic humanity and intrinsic needs to be loved, to be accepted and respected.
Right. I want to have everybody that's still here get ready to ask some questions in the comments. I have one more question for Dante, but feel free to ruminate and think things through. We still have some time, but I do have one more question myself for Dante. I had the opportunity to work on Netflix's Disclosure, and it was a great thrill. And if for anybody out there that has seen it, it really details all of the 100+ years of gender variance in media and in film. A lot of things that maybe we've laughed at, a lot of things that maybe we've laughed, characters we've laughed with, but also a great deal of misunderstandings about this community because they are largely written by people not in this community. And then we get to, I was also in a room for another film that I had worked on that isn't out, where the studio, they're like, this isn't enough struggle. Like they're too happy. Like the trans character is happy and like successful. And I'm like, yeah. And so we see the same thing for Zoe, right? That she's describing these events after they've happened, right? What happened with her school. She's describing the bullying that happened, or her mom is describing the bullying that happened in kindergarten or pre-K. But we don't visually see it, right? We don't visually see her father, reprimanding her for wanting to play with Barbies. It's all after the fact, and we get to focus on the positive. Um, and then naturally, we see people like Nava Mao, who I worked with on Disclosure, who's on Baby Reindeer and is the smartest character on there, right? So all of that is a long-winded way of saying, Zoe herself as a grown woman, she's an actress, and she's played some roles that maybe just so happen to be trans. Where do you see your film Raising Zoey in this in the whole universe of all trans like media representation? And where can people find this film next? What is next for you?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy you mentioned Nava Mao. So Nava Mao, I met her at Pomona years ago when we did a screening of. She was still a student of the Bambi film, and she told me about her dream of, someday maybe, being an artist. She didn't say an actor or, performer or anything like that. But I saw her previous show that she was in also on HBO Max, and I was just so thrilled. I mean, it's always a thrill to see people, that you've seen before they became they started presenting as their authentic selves. And this is the beauty of the journey that I've been doing with, with my filmmaking. The 17 years that I've been in LA. Making these films. And I think that this film, I mentioned to you before that we just showed the film about a month ago in Tijuana
Mm.
at a shelter for people who living with HIV. And the shelter's been there about 18 years. So they're like even kids, teenagers, and their parents who have their kids living with them. So it's like about 150 people live in this shelter. And the parents saw the film because the film also has, there's a version with Spanish subtitles. And they were asking questions about questioning their children, whether they are trans, non-binary. And so I think the film, like I said, has the timeliness to support those narratives and to educate allies and parents how to raise a trans child unconditionally. I think the time, and it was really intentional because we thought that by now there would be more, especially focused on the Latino community stories, and they haven't really been anything that has taken the place of Raising Zoey. And I look forward to seeing more of it. I mean, there have been some beautiful shorts, but there should be like more documentaries to take the mantle. But I think that because it's dealing with something that we all can relate to, which is the unconditional love of a mother for her child, no matter what. And that was always, kind of like my North Star, because I kept thinking, I always went back to my mother, you know, what would my mother have done in this situation? How she did it, of course, in a different circumstances, and also living in Peru, which is, conservative and machista and all of that. How could she would have handled the slings and arrows that came from the culture and society? So yeah, I'm just proud that I was able to bond with the family, to build that trust, and continue to show the film as one of the templates of how to love a child who is different than what you're used to. And with Ophelia, we had many discussions. Like Dante, I was my first child I had when I was 19. Nobody gave me a booklet on how to raise Letty. I'm talking about Letty. I was scared, and so I think the film answers some of the questions. Because, like you said, Ophelia is always trying to find out more and more and more and more on how to raise her child better, and taking that ignorance away, which is what is the crux of all the problems right now, all the anti-trans legislations. It's ignorance and fear. And the only way you take fear away is to finding out. There's a lot of scientific journals. There's tons of documentaries like Disclosure and others, that tell you a real human life story and how they become emboldened and brave and radical in the way they raise their children.
Right.
And I try to make my films with the sensitivity of somebody who hasn't walked on those shoes, but who knows what it is to be loved by a mother, and what it meant for me in my development as an artist and as a man, having somebody who just loved me unconditionally. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a long answer to your question, but in terms of getting the film, you can go to my website, which is dantealencastre.com, and try to get it through me. It's not on streaming. I want to keep, I'm very protective of my work, and I want to keep it close to my vest so it doesn't fall into the, not the wrong hands, but into situations where like not everybody's feeling safe and protected and taken care of. I mean, that's very important to me, that I take care of all the subjects that give me the fortune of being in my film, being in the films that I make. I'm very protective of of what they say, of what they, of what they can offer, of their wisdom, of their lives, stories. So that's the way to get to my work, to
Well,
my
thank you, Dante. No, thank you. I want to see if anybody that's lingering along has any questions for Dante. It's happy to answer anything and everything. I'm honestly so surprised that you're keeping up because you're jet lagged.
It's always a pleasure talking to you, Josslyn.
The feeling is mutual. Anything at all, even if it's a quick comment or question. Sam, before Sam had to leave, they said, this was so wonderful to see. So grateful Zoe and her family and her family's journey could be shared. It's been a pleasure to help archive your photos for our Outwards interview too, Dante. They had to leave early, but they're so glad for this film community and this event's collaboration.
Thank you, Sam.
Any questions, anything at all? We're all behind a screen. That hasn't stopped people from spewing hate, let alone asking questions.
Well, I want to ask Josslyn. I want to ask you a question. So before we started watching the film, you said you've watched the film like 9 times. So what is that in the last maybe 10 days, because you only had the screener for, so what did it bring to for you? I mean, what were the things that just kept drawing you back to watching it and watching it over and over again in
Right.
your own experience?
That it was a real family, that they were real, that they, you see a lot of things with people like reality TV shows where people can be vain or money hungry. And this is a real family with real working class values. I mean, you you can kind of see that exemplified. I mean, there's a person, they're really um it's a small moment in it that you can blink and you'll miss it, but they say parents are the trustees, of the children to trust, nurture, and make our children better. Um, and they are not to be made as we are. And you can really see that effort with Ophelia and her family, the sacrifices that they made, that they, that they had to readjust their budgets just to accommodate because, as her sister Letty said, this is life or death. And I think a lot of people just do not understand that if you do not affirm your child's gender pronouns and their identity, that it could kill them. And this would have been a drastically different movie if her father had been alive, and she had been in earlier stages of her transition where she was suicidal. It would have been a darker movie. It may not have even been a movie at all. But it was a really positive story that we generally don't see that often because, again, we want to, in our society now, we want to see our communities struggle. A lot of the movies that concern our communities, the Latino community, the Black community, the gay, whatever, those ones that get nominated that concern our communities are the ones about struggle and trauma and slavery and abuse and because you see the actors really putting in their all and really, um, stretching those muscles. But really, I mean, who's that really serving and benefiting if all the people who aren't in that community see it's the struggle? Then they associate us with the gangs and they associate us with just transitioning or being woke or doing this or doing that. So just to see something that's positive and digestible even in just 45 minutes is something that really drew me in to watch it again and again. Of course, I watched it just for the sake of, my questions and my research. But I also enjoyed it because, I was that little girl, I was her and a lot of the things that her family describes that she'd gone through at a really tender age of maybe 3, 4, 5. I'd gone through the same things. But for me, I did not go through the transition part until I was an adult.
Mhm.
So to see somebody that even if though their family didn't have the resources, they made it possible at such a young age is very inspiring. And I hope that we get to see more people in southern states, in other countries have, you know, the same change of heart because the resources are out there. We have no excuse. But I could go on a rant about this. I'm sure everybody has very limited time. I already love everything that you work on. Do you want to tell everybody about the next project that you have in the works, or are you keeping that to yourself?
Oh, which one? The one we were talking about 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Well, doing the research of the AIDS diva, The Legend of Connie Norman, which is about a trans activist uh, who was a member of ACT UP LA and who died of HIV and AIDS complications in 1996. I came across a poet, a Chicano poet, his name is Gil Cuadros, who also passed away in 1996 of HIV and AIDS complications, who wrote a book of poetry in 94 called City of God. And one of the reasons I was drawn to his writing is extremely powerful and explicit, and it touches upon family, raza, sexuality, caregiving, death, because he was he knew that he was gonna probably die of his disease. Like I was saying about Tijuana and also being in Peru in March, there's still a huge stigma around HIV and AIDS in the Latino community. And I want to explore that through the writing of his book, because his book was very provocative and sensual, and probably at the time was very incendiary, because he was really telling you how it was for him, how he was feeling inside to his very blood and bones and flesh. And I like the the fact that he was so vulnerable, as well as being so a fighter, and to shake up our community, because we're still, it's a deeply taboo subject in not only Latin America, but in community here in LA and California and other places. And because of that, and like I mentioned before, because of that ignorance, because we want to keep our eyes closed, that we don't see how we can help each other. We can help, especially the youth. We have in LA County a huge amount of kids under 24 who are becoming HIV infected with PrEP and PEP and all of that. Is because the the taboo and the prejudice and the bigotry and the basic not talking about sex in our communities is really killing us. Kids that age shouldn't have to be dealing with medications, that might alter their health or not. We don't know, but and I think Gil really opens this world that he had to live through, with the little time that he had. It's kind of like Connie Norman. It was a gift in terms that he gave him the chance to write this book, but it was also a curse because he was not going to be able to even enjoy that success or enjoy a longer life. He passed away when he was 34 years old. So imagine how many things he could have accomplished. And that's also another part of the layers of my interest in his work, is that, and also to rediscover him and, rediscover all the friends that he had who did survive and who were able to thrive, and who were touched by his art. I mean, his book is taught in many schools right now, in ethnic studies and gender studies and Chicano studies. And I think it's high time that we we learned about what make Gil Quadros thrive and live a little longer than he was when he was initially diagnosed.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Does anybody have any lingering comments as we finish up this conversation? Anything at all? Any compliments, unless you hated the movie?
Thank you, Josslyn. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Outwords, Mason, and everybody for giving me the opportunity and also giving the community an opportunity to learn from the elders in the community. And I support the work that you've done from the very beginning with Mason. I think I met him years and years ago when it was just one of his dreams, and he's made it a reality, and I'm so proud to be part of it. Being on the website with all those people, with Bambi and Mia, and all those people have accomplished so much more than I have, and it's just an honor. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Abby.
Thank you both so much. Oh, and just seeing Abby's comment, love the movie. Thank you. It was very inspiring. Ophelia's comments at the end really touched me. Yeah, same, Abby. Thank you both so much for this film and this conversation and your presence and the things you do in the world. And go forth and prosper.
Right. Thank you. Keep acting up and fighting back.
Amen.